But I haven't thought. Like next Sunday evening at our house. So if you're coming, I need to know. So, and I also have some directions.
Welcome to Contemporary Issues Sunday School class. We are going to have a good discussion today with Eric Schmidt, our classmate and high school science teacher, and other topics to talk about why civilizations thrive and conquer today. So a good historical and social type of issue. But first, we want to welcome usual announcements. Zoomers, thank you for being with us. Please mute yourself in the lower left corner of your screen. We are recording this for future playback. And I am Steve, leader of the class. If we have any first-time visitors, just want to introduce myself. Anybody here for the very first time? That's okay. Good. Well, nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. Could I ask your name?
Linda Sorrento. I'm
Linda.
visiting friends here that I've known for a long time. I'm the house sit for them while they're going away.
Nice to have you here, Linda. Hope you'll come back too. Okay. Other announcements. So we're having a potluck on September 1st at the Punings house at 5 o'clock. And a sign up is going around to bring things and have directions. Is that what you got?
I have some directions.
Okay.
If anybody needs them.
So if anybody here would like to come join, we'll be rocking out at the Punings house. Fall party. Okay. Any other announcements or things you want to share? Everybody watched the Democratic Convention this week.
Yay.
Enjoyed that. It was quite a show, wasn't it?
Wonderful.
Lots of good speakers. They kept it moving right along, the entertainment.
After the first day,
After the first day,
they started moving along.
they started moving quicker, Linda says. Yes.
Yeah.
And now the real work begins. See who will make it to the finish line. But it's been an interesting ride. What else can happen? What other twists and turns can happen? You never know. So we shall see. And here in class, in a few weeks, we will do a class on what is in the election, candidates, issues. So we'll just do a one-day review. Ron and I will, not making any endorsements, of course, but just reviewing and having a good discussion about it because there's a lot of candidates and things on the ballot. So that'll be fun.
But so everybody's safe. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That's right. Jane, go
What
ahead.
about September 14, the program that you're having?
September 14.
I think we've got the Supreme Court.
No, not this class.
Oh, the
That's Saturday.
all church breakfast.
Yeah.
Yes, starts again in the fall, and we're having a documentary filmmaker and a reporter for the Washington Post about healthcare and what are the different options in America with healthcare, socialized medicine versus private insurance. And so, yes,
And the
really,
date, I'm sorry, is it on
September 14th, Saturday. He'll speak from 9 to 10 in the morning on Saturday. Light breakfast here in Fellowship Hall. Yes, I'll send out a reminder about that. Thank you, Jane. Yes, that'll be a good topic.
15th, they're doing an all-church review of what's going on in the Methodist Church. Isn't that correct?
Oh, 15th is the, yes,
Every Sunday.
Immediately following this
yes,
class.
Our annual all-church
Yeah.
status of the church, St. Andrew and beyond, yes.
what day is that?
September 15th,
That's a Sunday in our church.
Yes.
yes.
I don't get home until the 60th.
And also on the 15th, Ron is going to be presenting an overview of the Supreme Court recently, the controversial decisions, and we'll have a couple of lawyer guests also to help us understand.
Jeff Klaus.
Jeff Klaus and Linda Daniel. And so our class members will help us understand why the Supreme Court has decided in different cases recently about abortion, separation of church and state, and other things that are in the news lately.
Presidential immunity.
Presidential
Yeah.
immunity too, there've been a lot, so that'll be a good social
That'll be
examination. Okay, we want to give Eric plenty of time He has a lot to get through, so please forgive us. We are moving along. Okay, yes, sir. Eric, thank you for being here and being in our class. You teach at Rock Canyon High School, did for many years. And what subjects did you teach?
Well, I started off with biology, honors biology, zoology, and marine biology. So I had several preps there. And 2 years later, they started this new program, Earth and Environmental Sciences, which included astronomy, geology, weather, and environmental science. So it was actually a lot more fun than biology because each quarter I got to teach something different. So first quarter was the astronomy, second quarter was the earth science and plate tectonics, and I really enjoyed learning new things about plate tectonics. And for instance, Africa, South America, they're still moving apart 1 inch per year. That's almost a foot every decade, still moving apart because of the divergent plate boundary that runs the length of the earth from the North Pole to the South Pole. So that was fun. And then weather too, learning about weather. Warmer air holds more water. So that's why it feels so uncomfortable when you go to New Orleans or Florida or something, because there's just more water in the air. Anyway, although I taught science, history has always been my first love. So I picked up this book at one of the Smithsonian's 2 years ago, Guns, Germs, and Steel. And I think I must have read the introduction or something, but I was very interested. It's a Pulitzer Prize winning book. And so I thought this would be a good topic to present. And it really begins with a question. Yali's question: why is it that you white people developed so much more cargo and brought it to New Guinea, but we black people had little cargo of our own? So that was the question that this author, Jared Diamond, started with. And he had been in, as a evolutionary biologist, he'd been in New Guinea for 33 years. So this was one of his colleagues, this Yali.
White people like stuff.
Yeah.
And we love our stuff.
We all know that history has proceeded very differently for people from different parts of the globe. Literate societies with metal tools have conquered or exterminated the other societies. This is the author's statement. People of Eurasian origin, especially those still living in Europe and Eastern Asia, plus those transplanted to North America, dominate the modern world in terms of wealth and power. Other people, including most Africans, have thrown off European colonial domination, but remain far behind in wealth and power. So, this is the author's first question. Why did wealth and power become distributed as they are now, rather than in some other way?
Tell me when you want me to.
Go ahead.
Say next slide.
All right. Question. This is the author's answer to why did Europeans rather than Africans or Native Americans develop guns, germs, and steel? Why didn't guns and steel arrive first in Africa, permitting Africans and their germs to conquer Europe? Author's answer: history followed different courses for different peoples because of differences among the people's environment. Not because of biological differences among peoples themselves. Next. Human ancestors. As you know, human evolution really began in Africa. African evolution sequence was Australopithecus africanus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus. The first human ancestor to leave Africa was Homo erectus. Fossils are found in Java. The Java man or woman date about 1 million years ago. Homo erectus evolved into today's Homo sapiens about 500,000 years ago. Skeletal remains can be found, but there's no art or bone tools. And that brings us to the next. Homo neanderthals appeared about 140,000 to 40,000 years ago in Europe and West Asia. So those are our ancestors. Next, please. And the great leap forward, 50,000 years ago, Cro-Magnons, fully modern human skeletons appeared in East Africa and Southeastern Europe. Cro-Magnon garbage piles yielded stone and bone tools, harpoon weapons, and bows and arrows. Also found cave paintings, statues, and musical instruments. The Ice Age, which is the Pleistocene epoch, ocean levels dropped hundreds of feet, allowing people movement in Borneo, Java, and Bali. Australia and New Guinea sites, radiocarbon dated 40,000 to 30,000 years ago, coincided with the first mammal extinction.
Music instrument, is that when the Rolling Stones began?
Okay, as part of this book.
Really good.
Catchy. As part of this book, I became interested in Clovis, New Mexico, and so after I visited my mom on the 4th of July in Cedar Falls, Iowa, drove down to Dodge City, don't stay at the Dodge House. And then I went to Clovis the next day. So I visited Clovis. There's a real nice history museum on the campus of Eastern New Mexico University. And then they directed me to the archaeological site called Blackwater Draw. And I'd just like to read you a couple things from this magazine I got. Beginning on page 2, the late Pleistocene in North America was a period when a wide range of animals became extinct. Probably the most known mammals that have become extinct are the American mammoth, the American mastodon, the saber-toothed cat, not tiger, the dire wolf, and the extinct bison, the pre-Columbian horse, the camel, and the giant sloth. Bones of all these animals have been found in the deposits at Blackwater Draw. The evidence is clear that the Pleistocene or Paleo-Indian peoples used both the American mammoth and the extinct bison for meat, skin, bone, and ivory. The Clovis finds, well, let's see, page 4. Much later, the excavation crew from the Denver Museum of Natural History discovered in July of 1926 a delicately made spear point with a central groove or flute. Eventually, more points, spear points, were found. This proved beyond a doubt that the first Americans had arrived at least by the end of the Pleistocene, which was about 11,700 years ago. The archaeologist Edgar Howard showed there was in the Americas an even earlier human presence, one that we now call the Clovis culture, named after Clovis, New Mexico. And then on page 7, in the summer of 1932, Edgar Howard, he stopped by Blackwater Draw on his way back to Philadelphia. Howard's examination of the area indicated a connection between the mammoth bones and the projectile points. And because it was the end of the season, he decided to return the next year. And then in 1929, a young man had sent a letter to the Smithsonian Institution with a Clovis point that he had found together, this is the key point, together with a piece of mammoth bone. So there's all this evidence of the location of these extinct animals with the spear points, that they were farmed, or not farmed, but hunted to extinction. And that will feed into my point of why Native Americans didn't develop the gun, germs, and steel. I'll get to that next slide.
Weren't the mammoth found in Snowmass also a few years
Yes,
ago?
yes, and the Denver Museum of Nature and Science is still in the process of preparing that for display at some point in the future. Yeah, they were excavating for a hotel, I think it was.
Yeah.
It's Snowmass.
Around Aspen.
Yep.
What did they find around Highlands Ranch?
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of that.
I'm not familiar with the Highlands Ranch.
There's a location in Sterling Ranch that is prehistoric. I can't remember the
Okay.
details of it, but yeah, there's local stuff.
Good,
I
yeah.
guess they were developing things in Highlands.
Yeah.
Ranch. They found.
Building Windcrest.
Yes.
And they had to stop because.
Oh, did they?
Down.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think it was T-Rex So.
It took the archaeologists and geologists many years to get the quarry digging stopped so they could start to excavate these bones in Clovis. Because the highway department was excavating, it was a gravel pit. I think it was, they were excavating to build highways. Just a review on Columbus. Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabel of Castile married in 1469, uniting their two kingdoms, becoming the first king and queen of Spain, later supporting Christopher Columbus, an Italian born in Genoa. The couple ruthlessly promoted Spanish Christianity, launching the Inquisition. I didn't know that. Conquering Granada and expelling the Jews and Muslims from the nation. That's a Smithsonian Associates link. In 1492, the kingdom of Granada fell to the Christian forces of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, and the Moors lost their last foothold in Spain. It took Spain 700 years to eject the Moors, and so the same year that Columbus left, 1492, that was the year that they finally, defeated the Moors after 700 years. The city of Granada was a Moorish fortress that rose to prominence during the reign of Sultan Almoravid in the 11th century. The Christian reconquest forced Spanish Muslims south, and the kingdom of Granada was reestablished as the last refuge of the Moorish civilization. Next. Okay, that's just a review of what we're leading into. Cortez meets Moctezuma, okay? That was his name, Moctezuma, and it became sort of anglicized, or maybe that's not the right word, but it became Montezuma. The meeting of King Montezuma and the Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortez, November 8th, 1519, is one of the most consequential in history, affecting the welfare, beliefs, and culture of millions of people living in the Western Hemisphere. Yet for centuries, historians have relied on only one side of the story, the Spanish account. It was a tiny narrative that described how Montezuma, on meeting Cortez and his retinue, swiftly surrendered his vast indigenous empire, recognizing the divine right of the Spanish and the Catholic Church to overtake his lands and people. When violent rebellion ensued, the story goes, the Spanish retreated with hordes of gold and returned and laid siege to the Aztec capital. But on the other side of the slide, on the left side, and this is history.com, Cortez wasn't Quetzalcoatl. The Aztecs never mistook him for a god. The myth came later to justify conquest. Montezuma saw Cortez as a man, not divine. Spaniards won through force and disease, not mystical belief. It's a colonial lie that needs burying. The truth is harder. Invaders took what they wanted, no divine right needed. So that was a separate source I looked into. I could pass this around if you wanted to see the book. Sure. You want to? Okay, next slide. Oh, I've seen it. Okay, so these are the myths. I alluded to them already. That Montezuma was a weak, unsophisticated leader. He was actually a warrior and well-respected military leader who maintained a vibrant city and culture, both politically and economically. King Moctezuma, let's see, his empire grew in size, status, and wealth despite 3 years of famine and 3 earthquakes. Myth 2, the Aztecs believed Spanish were gods, prophesied to return. I've heard that over and over again, that myth. 3, Moctezuma surrendered immediately to the Spanish. That's another myth. And 4, smallpox wiped out the Aztecs. The timing was later. Okay, so eventually it happened. Multiple outbreaks of European-born diseases decimated the Aztecs in the decade after 1519. So by 1545, it's reported that 90% of the population had died.
Wow.
The Aztecs.
Is that true?
Yes. So the timing is what was different.
Oh.
They weren't wiped out when he came there. It happened several decades later.
But
Yeah,
did
it wiped them out.
Did the Spaniards bring disease that the Indians could not
Yes,
fight off?
they brought smallpox, cholera, and typhoid, as well as measles and the flu. Next, so when I visited the site of where Montezuma's city lay, it's all in ruins, of course, the Spanish leveled it. But I saw this timeline and helped me understand these cultures. So the Olmecs came first on the left side. And then came the Mayas, which you can see with the orange line. They have the longest, they endure until today. The Spanish really never conquered the Mayans. They dispersed into the hills, and since the Spanish just were looking for gold and glory, you know, they weren't gonna chase them into the hills. They're looking for gold. So in Honduras, El Salvador, and parts of southern Mexico, you can still find indigenous Mayan people, Mayan origins. They're not mixed with Spaniards. They're not mestizos. Well, they're shorter. They have round faces. If you've been to Guatemala as part of the church program, one of the church missions, you'll notice indigenous people there as well. After or during the Mayans, actually, you had the let's see, the Teotihuacan. Those are the pyramids in Mexico. And just before the Spaniards, oh, Tula, I forgot Tula. And these were the Toltecs. And then finally, the Aztecs or the Mexicas, they call them in Mexico, where we get the name Mexico from. Right before, those were the people that Montezuma was a part of. Next. Okay, so Tenochtitlan on the left, Mexico City today, was built on crushed lake bed, and it is sinking. So you've got over 20 million, probably 30 million when you add in all the suburbs of Mexico City. And they've overpumped their groundwater. And so it's sinking as a combination of overpumping the groundwater, which leads to subsidence anyway. And the whole city is built on this crushed lake bed because Tenochtitlan, Montezuma's capital city of 250,000 or more people, it was the largest city in the Western Hemisphere before the Spaniards came. It was built on basically an island with water on four sides. There was a causeway in, but it was basically an island that they had filled in order to, they had filled it in with, I suppose, other soil sources or rocks or something, but it was basically an island. And so that's what Mexico City sits on today. And so the Metropolitan Cathedral, which is on the right, you can kind of see it there. It's got scaffolding around the towers because those towers are so heavy, they're sinking faster than the rest of the cathedral. But in the foreground on the right, those are the remains of Tenochtitlan, Montezuma's capital city. It's referred to as Templo Mayor. So if you visit Mexico City, you go to the right, just to the right, as you're facing the cathedral, to the right is this Templo Mayor. So you go down the steps and come out into these ruins. And it's a very well done walk around these ruins. And as part of these ruins, they've got a closed-in, air-conditioned museum. I think it's 4 floors that gives you all these details on Templo Mayor and the Mexicas. And it's a great visit. It really is.
There's 30 million people, Mexico City today,
Mexico City, and it's the suburbs around it, yeah.
and Denver is 2 million.
Yeah.
So it's more than 10 times as big as Denver.
Yeah.
Traffic.
Yeah,
Okay.
traffic.
Let's
Imagine
see.
the traffic.
Getting closer to halfway through.
Okay.
The New World Conquest. This is now the Incas. I put up one of my National Geographic maps up there. The biggest population shift of modern times has been the colonization of the New World by Europeans and the resulting conquest, reduction, and complete disappearance of most groups of Native Americans. This is page 65 from the book. The first New World contact with Europeans were the Norse, who occupied Greenland from 986 AD until 1500, but with no large impacts. There was really no large impact there. When I went to Iceland back in November, I met this man who claimed he was the 30th in an unbroken line of generations from the first settlers in northern Iceland, which was in 880.
Wow,
That's what he claimed. It's like he's the 30th.
Is that like Vikings
yeah.
that came?
Yep, they didn't use the word Vikings back then, and so they were referred to as Norse primarily. And they were from Norway, of course, but also Sweden and Denmark.
And they did a lot of exploring and
Yep.
conquering.
There's been a lot of our archaeological sites unearthed on the southwest corner of Greenland to verify their existence there. The most dramatic impact, however, came in 1532, when between Inca Emperor Atahualpa and the Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro in Peru. Atahualpa was absolute monarch of the largest, most advanced state in the New World. And Pizarro represented the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, aka Charles I of Spain. He was the grandson of Ferdinand and Isabella. And he was the son of Juana. They refer to her in Spanish books as Juana de la Loca. Her husband, Philip, had her declared insane, and she spent the last 37 years of her life in an insane asylum. So that was the mother of Charles I of Spain, the grandson of Ferdinand and Isabella. Next. Okay, so the Battle of Cajamarca. I think I'm saying it right. 15 November 1532, the noise and smoke of fire flashing European weapons, as much as their deadly destructiveness, carried the day for the Spanish conquistadors at Cajamarca, Peru. Francisco Pizarro's 128 invaders defeated the Inca army. A complacent King Atahualpa had allowed Pizarro's expedition to pass unhindered into his realm. The Incas were observing a religious fast and decided that so negligible an enemy could wait. On 15 November 1532, the Incas finally confronted the Spaniards in the main square of Cajamarca, but Atahualpa left the bulk of his 80,000 strong army outside the provincial city. This is a Britannica source. So on the map here, next slide. I'll go to the map next. Disease helped defeat the Incas. So King Atahualpa had just won battles in a civil war that had left the Incas divided and vulnerable. The civil war, a result of a smallpox epidemic that had spread from Panama and Colombia, killing the Inca Emperor Huayna Capac and his designated heir. So the death of his heir led to this conflict between two sons. Pizarro landed on the coast of Peru after the civil war between two of the sons of his dead heir, which left the Incas divided, and they were already devastated by disease. So on this map of the Inca Empire, it was divided in two after the Civil War. The northern capital was Quito, and the southern capital was, of course, Cusco. So Machu Picchu was not part of this. It was not the capital. It was sort of, now it's regarded as a religious center, they think. And Cajamarca is right about in the middle, right there. That's where this crucial battle took place. European diseases spread in advance. Okay, next slide. Cajamarca, author's final analysis. Pizarro, his capture of Atahualpa illustrates the set of proximate factors that resulted in Europeans colonizing the New World instead of the Native Americans colonizing Europe. So this is where we're getting into the meat of the answer to Yali's question. The immediate reasons for Pizarro's success included military technology based on guns, germs, steel weapons, and horses, infectious diseases endemic in Eurasia, and writing. But we are still left with the fundamental question, why all those immediate advantages came to lie more with Europe than with the New World? Why weren't the Incas the ones to invent guns and steel swords or to bear diseases to which the Europeans lacked resistance or to develop ongoing or ocean-going ships? So that's, again, the author's question. Why weren't the Incas the ones to go to Europe with these ships and such? Next now.
Technology,
That's one of the answers.
that era technology.
Yep, the ultimate cause, not the proximate cause, the ultimate cause was food production, a prerequisite for development of guns, germs, and steel. Plant and animal domestication led to denser human populations by yielding more food than the hunter-gatherer lifestyle, which predominated in the New World. Food producers, who necessarily remained sedentary near their fields, had a higher birth rate and fed more people, leading to higher population densities than hunter-gatherers. Food surplus stores allowed non-food producing specialists like kings, bureaucrats, and soldiers to arise. Now you've got the ability to support these other people who are not out hunting and gathering. Next. Edible plant species. Of the 200,000 wild plant species, only a few thousand are eaten by humans, and only a few hundred of those have been domesticated. In fact, a dozen plant species account for 80% of the modern world's annual tonnage of all crops. So we're talking wheat, corn, rice, barley, soybeans, and sorghum, potato, manioc, and sweet potato, sugar cane, sugar beet, and banana. 80%. Next. Okay, and this is just a slide to show you when these foods arose. So in the Fertile Crescent, 8,500 BC, they had wheat, pea, and olives. They also had sheep and goats. China, 7,500 BC, they had rice and millet, pig and silkworm. Mesoamerica, Central America, 3,500 years ago, they had corn, beans, and squash. But all they had for domestic animals was the turkey. In fact, I have friends in El Salvador, and turkey is what's served on Christmas, if they can afford it. So one of my friends, we went to the store and I bought his mom a turkey, because that's part of their Mayan culture, is they eat turkey on Christmas. Of course, it wasn't Christmas back then, but it is now. Andes and Amazon, 3,500 years ago, the potato and the manioc. But they only had the llama and the guinea pig as domestic animals. Remember?
Guinea pig, little one?
Well, they're about
Yeah.
6 to 8 inches.
I saw them on the menu.
Yeah, well, they're on the grill. At the equator, when I visited the equator at Quito, they were cut down the middle and laying on the grill. So I could have had one.
Go in.
Love one.
I didn't have one, but next time.
Yeah.
Down there.
And then eastern US, Native Americans had sunflower and goosefoot, but again, no animals, because those went extinct. As I mentioned, the Clovis spear points point to that extinction. Next. Okay, factors affecting the shift from hunter-gathering to food production. Increasing availability of domestic wild plants, large mammal extinction, I mentioned, in North and South America at the end of the Pleistocene epoch, technological advances for collecting and storing wild foods, a two-way link between the rise in human population density and the rise in food production. So this is kind of a chicken-egg conundrum. Which came first, the density or the food production? I think it was food production that led to the human density. Denser populations of food producers enabled them to displace or kill hunter-gatherers because of their numbers. They had a higher birth rate, they lived longer, and their technology, their germs, and their soldiers. Next. Food production. These were the advantages that they had in the Fertile Crescent. It was a Mediterranean climate zone. Wild ancestor crops were abundant, highly productive. Flora had a high percentage of hermaphroditic self-pollinators. The domesticated large animals. This is important, you'll see later. Goat, sheep, pig, and cows, whereas Mesoamerica had only 2 domestic animals, again, the turkey, I didn't mention before, and the dog. Turkey and the dog. Competition between hunter-gatherers was less. So by 6,000 BC, many societies were completely dependent on crops and animals. Those are the advantages of the Fertile Crescent.
So fertile
Next.
soil and more animals determine who.
I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Food production. These are the disadvantages in New Guinea and the eastern North America. They had no cereal crops in New Guinea, no domestic large mammal species in New Guinea. New Guinea staple crops, taro and sweet potato, are low in protein, leading to consuming mice, spiders, frogs, and maybe even cannibalism to get their protein needs. Otherwise, they develop a condition which you still see in Africa today called kwashiorkor, which is low in protein deficiency. I'd see these pictures of these little kids with the stick legs and these distended big bellies, yeah. And I always wondered, well, why are they starving? Well, that's not because the extended stomach is a condition or a result of the kwashiorkor, the protein deficiency. So they have
What
those
it does
distended-
is it starts to eat the protein in the body. in
Oh.
order to sustain themselves, and so that stomach area gets weak.
Oh,
So
okay.
they've got-
And that's what, okay, so this, it's the loss of the stomach muscles then.
Yeah.
Corn arrived late from Mexico to North America in 200 AD and beans in 1100 AD. Leading to densely populated chieftains along the Mississippi. So there were dense populations in North America, but they were dispersed. Thus, the Fertile Crescent developed food production and denser human populations much earlier, leading to more complex political organization, more technology, and more epidemic diseases to infect other peoples. Next. Domestic animals, more Eurasian advantages. Horses, donkeys, yaks, reindeer, and camels allowed long-distance transportation. Horses played a military role until World War I, when tanks and trucks took over. Germs evolved from these domestic animals. Smallpox, measles, and flu mutations came from similar germs affecting domestic animals. So most of our modern diseases have originated from animals, these large animals. Plant and animal domestication led to more food and denser population, explaining why empires, literacy, and steel weapons developed much earlier in Eurasia than other continents. Okay, so we had 14 mammals. Domestic, herbivorous and omnivorous mammals over 100 pounds that could be, this is the definition for domestication, into useful animals for humans. Elephants were useful, but they were never bred in captivity. So the 5 major domesticated animals were sheep, goat, cow, pig, and horse. The minor ones were the camels, Arabian and Bactrian, llama and alpaca, donkey, reindeer, water buffalo, and yak. South America had only the llama and the alpaca. So you didn't have these large load-bearing animals. Australia and sub-Saharan Africa had no domestic animals. Eurasia had ancestors of the big 5 and 8 more minor ones, a reason leading to being first to have guns, germs, and steel. North America's large mammals were extinct beginning 13,000 years ago, as I mentioned. Horses, modern European ones, not obtained until the late 17th century. Sheep from Spain later transformed the Navajo society, which became sheep herders. And then you had these ongoing wars between Mexicans and Navajo, stealing each other's sheep and children, taking them, and that's talked about in the book Blood and Thunder, the history of the Southwest, and Kit Carson. Next.
Time check, 11:15.
Okay.
Leave some time for discussion.
Okay, what am I on? Slide number, I can't see, is it 26 or 36?
I don't know.
Okay, 4 stages of disease. I'll go through these quicker.
34.
I'm on 30. Oh,
It says it down on the bottom.
okay. I can't see it on the side here, but yes, I'm getting there. Almost there. Domestic and pet transmission to humans is the first stage of disease evolution to humans. So the bird flu now would be an example that it has now passed from the cows to the people that are taking care of the cows. The next stage would be,
Article in the paper this-
okay. The next would be the pathogen evolves to be transmitted between people. Think Ebola, HIV, and maybe COVID. I think the jury's still out on that one. Animal pathogens established in humans and not died out again, COVID through, although animal transmission not yet firmly established. Next. Okay, why the New World didn't have diseases waiting for the Spaniards. The denser human populations began later in the New World. You had the three most densely populated American centers were Central America, the Andes, and the Mississippi Valley. But they were never connected by regular fast trade into one large breeding ground for microbes. In the same way that Europe, North Africa, India, and China became linked in Roman times. So the main reason European crowd diseases evolved from large domesticated herd animals, but only 5 animals became domesticated in the Americas: the turkey, the llama, alpaca, guinea pig in the Andes, Muscovy duck, and in South America, the dog, tropical South America, and dog in the Americas. Yeah. Okay, next slide. Writing, together with weapons, microbes, and centralized political organizations, writing was another agent of conquest. Early writing served the needs of record keeping and royal propaganda, and used by the bureaucrats, nourished by stored food surpluses grown by food-producing peasants. Writing emerged independently only in the Fertile Crescent, Mexico, and probably China as the first areas of food production. Okay, two more. So technology. Sedentary living was decisive for the history of technology. So you had people, and they're not nomadic now, they're living in close proximity to their crops. Food production made it possible to develop specialists fed by food producing peasants, beginning earliest in the Fertile Crescent and China, and allowing many inventions to spread rapidly along Eurasia's east-west axis in the post-Pleistocene era. So the diffusion of technology was made easier with fewer barriers in Eurasia. I'm not sure if we skipped over the slides where it talks about, the book talks about the differences between the Eurasian continent, 2 continents together, and the North American, South American. So I think we went over, I think we passed over the slide that said Eurasia, you've got this, the same sort of climate zone between Ireland and all the way to Japan. And it's the same latitude, same day length, same rainfall, and that's an advantage to what we've been talking about. Whereas North America, South America, at its widest point is 3,000 miles, Brazil. But its north and south is 9,000 miles. And you have all of these geographic ecological barriers. And that's where, I don't know what happened to that slide unless we skipped over it. But that's where you talk about the Darien Gap between Colombia and Panama, where people today are struggling to get through these messy, wet, dangerous rainforests so they can get to Panama, so they can get to Mexico, so they can get here. And then, of course, the northern Mexican desert was another barrier, so that in Central America or in Mexico, they're growing corn, which came from Central America originally. You've got corn and you have these other crops like squash, and they didn't come north for several thousand years because of these geographic barriers. And so the axis is important, like the east-west versus north-south axis of these countries. And so the final answer is the striking differences between the long-term histories of peoples of the different continents have been due to innate differences, or not to innate differences in the peoples themselves, but to differences, once again, in their environments.
Yeah.
4 most important differences, the author says these are not subject to dispute, but quantitative or quantified objectively. Available plant and animal species, factors affecting diffusion and migration, that's the one I was alluding to. The east-west moving was easier. Diffusion between continents, Ergo, Eurasia to sub-Saharan Africa was easier. And the continental area of population size. So the ultimate cause, because gun, germs, and steel are proximate causes, the ultimate cause of disparate degrees of power and affluence was food production and livestock, which led to the proximate causes of germs, literacy, technology, including guns, and central government systems. Now I can entertain questions. Maybe we can find out.
That was a terrific presentation. It's so synthetic. You covered everything, man. That was terrific. I'm glad you began with New Guinea and cargo. I did my doctoral work in New Guinea. As a part of that, I studied cargo cults,
Wow.
which is exactly what you were referencing.
Cargo cults?
That, yeah, the cult around the cargo issue
Oh,
that
okay.
you nicely addressed.
Okay.
Briefly, each cargo cult has a leader of some sort, a charismatic leader who will bring the people together and wrestle with the issue around cargo, white man's cargo, the non-white man's cargo, and the issues of getting it, as you said, Eric. And speaking of a gun, the cargo cult leader I interviewed stole a gun from a Catholic pastor. I know you're thinking, what's a Catholic pastor doing with a gun? But he has, the cargo cult leader, the New Guinea gentleman, stole the gun and used, he didn't shoot anybody, he used that gun as a symbol of power to attract cargo cult aficionados to his village.
Amazing. Was there any cannibalism practiced in that part?
Previously, these same people were counts.
Okay, yeah.
For those that don't know, Peter is a professor of cultural anthropology, recently retired, studied it all over the world.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Peter.
Well, didn't you actually discover someone from
Yes.
in New Guinea?
I
mean,
Discovered a lost tribe.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Very cool.
I found it. America's major axis is north-south as it spans a greater north-south distance, 9,000 miles, then east-west distance, 3,000 miles. Eurasia's major axis is east-west. So the axis orientation affected the rate of crops diffusion and livestock and possibly riding wheels and other invention. And then on the next slide, crops in Europe and India spread rapidly east and west from the Fertile Crescent because those localities shared the same latitude, day length, and seasonal variations. They also shared similar diseases, temperatures, and rainfall profiles, habitats, and biomes. Portugal, northern Iran, and Japan are more similar in climate than any location 1,000 miles south. By the time of Christ, cereals of the Fertile Crescent had spread 8,000 miles from the Atlantic of Ireland to the Pacific, to the Pacific coast of Japan. So contrast the ease of east-west crop diffusion with the difficult north-south diffusion in Africa. Fertile Crescent crops didn't diffuse through 2,000 miles of tropical conditions to reach South Africa. Cool highlands of Mexico would have been ideal for raising llamas, guinea pigs, and potatoes from South America. But the northward spread was stopped by the narrow Darien Gap. 5,000 years after the llamas were domesticated in the Andes, the Olmecs, Maya, Aztecs, and other native Mexican societies had no pack animals or edible domestic mammals except dogs. So
So Eric,
this is what I thought,
Eric,
this is what we missed.
if you go to Mesa Verde and you go up top,
Yes.
they show you areas where they had squash and beans and corn. So, and now those people left because they couldn't, I guess, sustain themselves, but what time era was that? Pretty early. So
Well-
where did they get these crops from?
The earliest that I'm aware of, because I visited the site, was Chaco, the Chaco historical site in northwestern Mexico.
But you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
right?
Well, from Chaco, then they spread out, and again, there's conjecture, but they may have run out of water at Chaco. And they didn't disappear, they dispersed, and they went to Mesa Verde, they went to the pueblos outside of Santa Fe. They dispersed, and there's genetic links between all of those. And in fact, one of the slides I deleted, I took a picture of this slide in, it was either Clovis or it was a Lakota school in South Dakota, but it talked about there's 21 tribes that came out of the Puebloan culture. So they're not, so we call them, they like to be referred to as ancestral Puebloans, not Anastas.
Okay.
They prefer the ancestral Puebloan moniker, I guess. Just like the Sioux don't like to be called Sioux, they'd rather be called Lakota or Hunk Papa or one or the other. Yeah.
Very quick.
Yeah,
With COVID, do we think that, I know you said the jury's still out on COVID, but do we think there's any legitimacy to, it was started by bats in China? So it went from.
it hasn't been settled yet. See, the reason I said it hasn't been settled is because I think there's division in terms of whether it came from a live animal sites, because when you go to Southeast Asia, they have live animal markets. Small, young puppies in cages, you know, they have those things. But there's still some discussion about whether or not the viral lab in Wuhan, which we were supporting, we were funding, whether or not it came out of that experimentation that they were doing in Wuhan. My niece was there 6 months before COVID. She was in Wuhan.
We got about 3 minutes left. Comments, questions? Zoomers, please feel free to jump in if you'd like to.
Yes, Gene.
Would either you or Peter sometime take on the topic of with the large infusion from South America and the various cultures, the impact on North America and some of the cautionary notes, as well as some of the advantages? Is that a topic of interest? Because it's becoming a
Sure.
second language, Spanish, as you know, in
Yeah.
many parts of our country. Might that be a topic sometime?
I would defer to our anthropologist.
So I defer to you.
One of my best female rock climber, well, I had a climbing club at Rock Canyon, and she was adopted from Guatemala. So she had very distinct Mayan features. She could climb a flat rock and somehow find something to grab hold of and move up the face of this rock. She went into archaeology at CU, and now she's working some of these archaeological sites. I'm not sure where though, but yeah, it was one of the 2 graduation parties I got invited to in 15 years. Because freshman teachers just don't get the invites. Like if you teach upper level, juniors or seniors, they always seem to get most of the graduation invitation. But she invited me, got to know their parents. They went down to Guatemala for a visit, and she roasted marshmallows on one of these volcanic vents, you know. That was but in Iceland, you can put, and this is that cook, Gordon Ramsay, I think it was, he did it in Iceland where they put the dough in the ground and 24 hours later they had a rye bread, you know, they pulled it out of the ground. Any other questions?
I've got one if you don't mind. Eastern, in the Eastern world, China being such a developed, long history society, didn't it have explorers that went out in boats and tried to conquer and explore new areas? China is such an old country.
I know
Was it not?
I know they went that part of the world. They went to the Philippines, Southeast Asia, and eventually to the Pacific Rim. I don't know. I think they may have gone to India and Africa, but they didn't circumnavigate the globe like Vasco da Gama or of course, you probably all knew Magellan didn't make it around the world, right? His world tour ended on Mactan Island. I've been there 3 times. When he tried to claim the Philippines for Spain and got himself in the middle of a local war, and that was the end of his world tour. His ship sailed on. His expedition made it back, but he didn't. Yeah, that was 1521. So the Spaniards were in the Philippines from 1521 until 1898, when the Spanish-American War began after the sinking of the Maine. And then there was a brief, very short independence period for the Philippines when McKinley decided, no, we're not going to give you your independence. Which he claimed he made that decision after 3 weeks of prayer and meditation. That's what McKinley, in one of the books I read about, it was about MacArthur. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Good to know how things happened around the world. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. Those who are here, if you'd like to take some cake home, please help us get rid of the cake. Wrap up a little and take it home.
And where did the,
Congratulations
where's the book?
Jim and Jane. We hope to see you next week. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
That was an important part.
Excuse me.
Sorry about that.
I didn't have.
Oh, yeah.
Cooley.
Cooley.